From the gyms around Michiana, this is 16 Sports Extra.
Welcome into the 16 Sports Extra podcast. I'm Neill, that's Sabrina Hoover. And today, I know it's a basketball background, but we're talking about like all of the local high school sports around here in Indiana specifically because Rule 19, the thing we've been talking about kind of all week, Sabrina.
I know this entire week it seems like it's like story after story after story, but me and Jackson have been really working on this like the last 2 months, you would say, or last three.
Yeah, I feel like, what was it, like it was probably like right around the middle of basketball season, like the February time frame. We first heard about the changes coming to this, kind of been talking to some people.
Yep.
And yeah, you're right. I think in the past month, really kind of going hard at it to get the stories together. But this has been something we've been kind of tracking for the past couple months. Yep. Because in our eyes, and I think a lot of eyes around people in the local high school sports community, this could be a really big deal, and I don't think people are realizing that.
Yeah, and if you haven't really caught up to speed of what Rule 19 really is, on May 5th, the Board of Directors of the Indiana High School Athletic Association provided some updates, which it addresses first-time student transfers. So according to the IHSAA, students making their first transfer between so-called school will now keep full eligibility as long as the transfer occurs within their first 6 semesters of high school. And Jackson, you kind of went into, what the rule previously was and what it is now, because last time here in Indiana, you had to sit out a year. Is that correct?
Exactly. So basically before, the way people are, remember this rule in Indiana is that, okay, you transfer schools, you got to sit out a year. And there's been some recent examples over the past several years of some kids doing that because, you had your parents move, things along that line. It just happens. Right. Now, you could apply for an exemption. And that was one thing that we saw. Think about, and it's very similar to college sports, almost 5-6 years ago. Before the transfer portal opened up, there was this 2-3 year stretch in college sports where everyone was applying for exemptions. And that's, you could do the same thing in high school where it's like, okay, like if there's a significant family issue that you had to move schools and you just didn't want to miss your senior football season, you could apply for that exemption. Well, they were, getting more requests for that.
Right.
So we'll get into other states that have done this, but other states as well have kind of adopted this rule, which Indiana now has of, okay, first 6 semesters, so basically before you're a senior, if you transfer your first time, not second or third, but your first time transferring, you are just able to immediately play sports. You don't have to apply for an exemption. There's no risk of you having to sit out a full calendar year. So even if you transfer through the school year, like calendar year, not just school year.
Yes.
So that is the difference, is that basically you can transfer and play right away. You could transfer schools in July and you're on the football team in August.
Yes.
And obviously, this is a rule where we're hearing coaches say certain things, and we'll kind of get into that. But I mentioned it right there. We've seen other states adopt this.
Yep.
And one such example is in West Virginia, which I kind of looked into a little bit. And Sabrina, I know you've kind of seen some of the stuff I've reported on, but it's been kind of crazy there a little bit.
Yeah, knowing how West Virginia has had this rule for 2 years now? Is that correct? Like the last 2 years? You got some footage right there from that sports reporter. And, it's really interesting to me knowing that you got to talk to a reporter in Huntington that has had this rule for a while. He's seen a lot of kids, since they've had it for 2 years, a lot of kids have transferred now. A lot of kids have been, I think he said the scores have been 68-0, or crazy scores like that have been these power schools with all these Division I talent here and there. And it's crazy knowing what's happened there now in West Virginia, and now knowing that here in Indiana, they're just starting this rule now in Rule 19, and then what it could look like years from now.
Exactly. I talked with Jim Tracy, who's a sports anchor at WSAZ in Huntington. This is where this footage is coming from. As you can see, some overmatched football, it looks like right there. Basically, he went through it with me in the first regular season that this rule was allowed because it was passed in the spring of 2023. So that fall of 2023, 86-0, 77-0, 58-0, 86-0, 93-7, 81-0. 89-7. Those are some scores he shared between Huntington High, Hurricane, another school out there, basically showing, what happened with this rule. And the thing talking with him, the biggest thing that I heard was, it's not like the transfer portal in college necessarily, where you see whole rosters change from season to season. What you see more of along the lines that happened in West Virginia was high-end talent. So a school that maybe would lose, 49-14 in the high school football playoffs, all of a sudden those two, that really good running back and that really good linebacker on the team that would only score 14 points, they're now on the team that's scoring 49, and then you get those scores that are like 86-0, 77-0. So that was basically what happened. Even seeing 433 athlete transfers in that first year, triple the number of the year before that rule was enacted. It's definitely had some big effects.
Definitely. And I know you talked to, we'll get more into the coaches, of course, but you talked a lot with maybe this potentially, I know some states have it, but NIL, and then bringing that into it. And I know we talk so much about how things just trickle down, right? So things happen in the pro, stage, and then now the NCAA and what's happening in the NCAA. Now it's trickling down to high school sports, which is interesting in many ways. And we could go out, talk a lot about different angles about this, but knowing that now we're in this generation where, okay, you could be 14, 15, having an agent, and then also getting NIL money.
Exactly. I think that's a great point right there. I think one thing before we leave the West Virginia comparison is that West Virginia, the one big difference with West Virginia, you did not have to change residency for their rule to take place, whereas in Indiana, it's easy to transfer within school districts. Some schools have open enrollment, other schools don't. So it's kind of it depends basically, but like if it's an open enrollment school, it's pretty easy. It just kind of depends.
Yeah.
But what you mentioned right there, this trickle down effect, because another story I did is I heard we've been hearing rumors about maybe agents. I mean, we've seen some local athletes in this area have agents to help them get into college. Well, now with this whole aspect of transferring, that brings up the idea of NIL, things like that, like you mentioned. Well, you talked with the IHSA's commissioner and kind of asked point blank about NIL, because right now it's not allowed according to the rules.
Yep.
But it's, could that change, whatever? So we have an answer from him that we want to play.
Our philosophy is this: you can't sell what you don't own. You don't own a school's uniform. You don't own their facility. You don't own their name. If a student wants to teach somebody how to shoot a basketball or hit a baseball or a softball with their own name, and they do it on their own, that's not something that we're necessarily getting involved in the future.
So I think that's a really interesting answer there. Because obviously, the first thing you hear there is, okay, you can't be using, the school name, the school logos, the school uniform, the school facilities to be making money. Obviously, NIL is against the law right now in terms of Indiana rules. But that last part he said right there, if they want to use their own name, they're not necessarily going to get involved. It feels like it's leaving a little bit of a gray area, Sabrina.
Yeah, I would say that as well. It's interesting because, again, just like you said, you can't sell what you don't own. So let's just say so-and-so wants to go teach a group of kids how to hit a baseball, just like he said, and he has, hey, here's so-and-so doing this, school's not affiliated with it, nothing big and bright about where he goes to school, but it's the name, and they know who he is. But again, it's the gray area. I think a lot of kids will use that if that is, some sort of things they want to do to their advantage in a way, because just like he said, that's not something that they're going to really
exactly
talk about,
and that's the thing. It's like, because with that, what that answer right there, we talked about this off air, but like what that answer right there to me says is, okay, let's say I'm a local high school basketball star, and I want to host a camp, and like you said, not have any school affiliations, not have anything in that. Put
just
it
at some random park.
Random park. And you know what? Maybe I'll get it sponsored by a local company, that's presented by whatever car dealership or something, or local health services thing. And it's my camp and I'm making money off of it. And is that allowed? Because if you read the rule book, it doesn't seem like it is, but according to that answer, it kind of feels like it is.
Yeah.
Where it's so that's kind of the gray area where I'm going to be really interested to see if that's allowed, because if that's allowed, all of a sudden that could have other consequences. Because what if that sponsor wants you to transfer to another school? That's what we saw in the college game.
That's true.
That is what we saw in the college game. And I think there's a legitimate question to ask, will we see that in high school? Because going off all of that, I talked with a high school sports agent. Sabrina, these things exist. Like these guys, like this is, which I was shocked by.
Me too. Me too.
I didn't realize this. So I talked with Kirk Butler. He works for 9091 Sports Agency. It's based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but he deals with athletes all across the country. Because as we talked about West Virginia, other, states have rules like this. And primarily these agents would deal with like getting you college scholarships. Well, now as these states are passing these rules, if you have an agent, why don't they deal with, getting you another high school maybe? And I think that to me is where it's talking with him is just, it was really eye-opening of, wow, the type of consequence, the type of things this could lead to.
Yeah, and I also want to point out too, when we're talking about, these 14, 15-year-olds, getting different agents and NIL and whatever, have you noticed how many high schoolers have like hype videos made about them, and they have personal photographers and videographers go out to their games, get footage, they actually make TikToks for them if they hire a videographer or whatever, or an editor. I think that in a sense is definitely NCAA, because a lot of NCAA players have a lot of hype videos here and there, but even having that and knowing that's in the high school world, high school basketball, high school football, it's insane to me.
Exactly. And that's such a good point, because a lot of times when you hear agents, you're thinking like, oh man, like this, like really, come on, they're just high school kids.
Right.
Well, the thing that's happening is there's just becoming more and more things, responsibilities, aspects of high school athletics. Like obviously, first of all, it's just getting better. Like I need a specialized trainer to help me improve my jump shot or hit the baseball or the softball better. Then it's also, okay, if I'm thinking about going to college, okay, I need someone to help me reach out to these college coaches, because, these college coaches can only see so much. And I know nowadays you can have your huddle, or you could have your online, video on YouTube or whatever, but even then they get so many links sent to them. It's hard, hard to get them to see that. So that's another aspect. Now it's, should I be at another high school because I can transfer? Okay, that's another thing. All right, even producing that video. Okay, how do I get that, video, the editing? You kind of start to see how there's all of these, we didn't even touch on NIL on that. Like there's all these different aspects that, that's like what a college athlete deals with now. And you just can see this trickling down to high school. And that's, I think, where you start to see like, okay, when you just add one thing to another, it all, like this, the sum is greater than the parts, or whatever that saying is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever that saying is. But that's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that too, because it's almost seeming like we're getting away from the whole academic side of what high school is supposed to be. High school is supposed to be a place where you can grow and develop and, get to the college level, but also academically and athletically as well. But again, you're participating with, like your kids that you've known forever. You want to spend in a high school for 4 years with the kids that you grew up with. I mean, we've interviewed so many Indiana high school, kids that have played with these kids forever since they were kindergartners. So I think what the commissioner was also saying too is that NCAA has kind of, talked a lot about athletics and whatnot, and he's really wanting to keep this academics as much as he can. But again, with how the world is kind of changing now, it's kind of hard to keep up. I mean, he did say like he is going to try his best to continue that, but it's hard right now. No,
and I think, and one thing too that did come up in my conversation with both Jim Tracy from West Virginia and also the Kirk Butler, the sports agent. But Kirk said that, academics is first for them, that even as an agent, they do help with tutoring and, that aspect, that aspect as well. It's, pretty much a full service thing. Right. And then in West Virginia, that was a big reason why you didn't see, basically besides the high level talent transferring is because if you're just starting playing football at high school, and that's, you just like playing football or basketball or baseball, softball, whatever. It's like, yeah, you want to play with the kids you grew up with. So that's why I don't see as 20 kids leaving his school. And also it's still just high school. But I think the biggest thing, so we're recording this on Friday, and your piece hasn't aired yet. We're recording this in the mid-afternoon, but by the time you guys see this online, you could be able to check out all these pieces, but especially this one, Sabrina, because you went out and you talked with a lot of local Indiana high school coaches. What did you kind of hear from them?
The biggest thing I want to point out first, overall, they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know how to handle this. Neither do we. We're just kind of displaying the information as we hear. But this doesn't go into effect until June 1st. And I think Craig Kaler of Concord's football head coach, he said it the best. He was like, no one's lost anyone and no one's gained anyone. So we don't know how this is going to affect high school athletics. We don't know how this is going to affect the coach's perspective of this. We don't know anything. So I think the way that they want to handle it, they obviously don't know that, but they can prepare for things like if a kid, wants to leave the school after, years of being developed, they kept saying, we want the best for the kids. We care a lot for them. If they see elsewhere, then that's fine. But they know that as a coach, their number one priority is the kids and keeping the kids safe and healthy and whatnot. So, and I think another thing is interesting too, that a lot of coaches have talked about, because some of them had some worries, about, kids leaving and what that's going to do. And also the biggest thing is like the culture of a program, of a high school. Because if you think about it, like Mishawaka, for instance, like those Mishawaka football, they are, they're all decked out in all the Mishawaka gear in the stands, and you see all the little kids everywhere. The biggest thing the Mishawaka and Keith Kinder talked about is like, they're going to keep the culture the same that they've had for years. It's not going to be, they would always welcome in a player for sure, but they want to develop the players that are there at Mishawaka because that's the culture, and they're not wanting to change that. And I think a lot of coaches, especially, at basketball and baseball and whatnot, they're worried and just kind of scared about, is that going to change the culture of, like the stands and the people that come to the games and how many people will be there, just like the school pride in itself, really. If that's going to change, I think that was the number one thing as well. And then just knowing, Craig Kaler, again, I think he had the best quote about this, but he's not happy about it. He's not happy about what the Rule 19 looks like right now. But again, he can't really say much on it because, again, his perspective might change and any coach's perspective might change because they don't know what's going to happen and how they're going to handle it. But that's the number one thing that a lot of coaches have been saying is like they have some worries about this and kids coming and kids leaving and how the parents will be involved in this as well. And then the thing that we talk about all the time with the NIL and the agents and whatnot. And again, we're talking about high schoolers here.
Yes.
And I think that's the number one thing that we've been me and you have been talking about is like, these aren't 19, 20, 21-year-old, these are like 14, 15, 16-year-olds. Like, these are children. And I think, yes, it goes back to how the commissioner talked about school choice and having these kids choose. And if, I think Tyler Layton at Jimtown, he's now the Concord head basketball coach now, he talked about being a positive, maybe seeing if, a kid's situation at a certain school wasn't great for the family, then that could be a positive, seeing that kid gets out of that and moves to somewhere where he's happy. But again, it's children that we're talking about. And I think this we're getting out of the reality of, okay, these are kids that are going to participate with their friends, making a team for a football team and also spending time with friends and developing and growing academically. And now we're turning to, okay, how are we going to have a scholarship out of this? How are we going to get to the D1 level out of this? You know what I mean? Or how are we going to, create a team that's going to be all powerhouse? I don't know. It's just really interesting to hear that.
No, I think I completely agree. And there's so many things right there. And one thing too, like, Tyler Layton, as you just mentioned, he touched on it. The reason for this rule is because if there is, for the kids that are in tough school situations for any reason, you don't want them to, and their family to think, this situation's tough for us, but we don't want to change schools because we don't want our kid to miss out on a full year of playing soccer and softball. Like, you don't want that type of decision where, kids stuck in a situation maybe they don't like at that school just because they don't want to become ineligible. And that's why this rule is in place. But I think what you also mentioned there was all of these ramifications, all of these side things where it can lead to some pressure. And I love that point you made of these are kids. Yep. Is that a lot of times, with the transfer portal in college sports, we talk, these are college kids. But you're right. They're all adults technically. Still very young, 19, 20, 21, obviously, but they're at least above 18. This is different. This is completely different than that in terms of putting pressure to transfer or change locations on someone who's a high school kid.
Yeah,
it is definitely very different. But I love that point you made too about the stands too. I didn't even think about that. The idea of, okay, well, let's say you have an open enrollment school and all of a sudden you start recruiting kids from maybe 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away. Well, it's going to be a lot harder to have school pride and to have people in the stands. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and that's so crazy too, because I didn't either until I talked to these coaches, but a lot of them were like, again, it's the whole trickle down effect. It's like things that are happening now. And I think even Keith Kinder made a really good point. It's kind of funny. I've heard this a lot from people, but they stopped watching college football because they were like, it's hard to keep up with, your favorite player because now he's at so-and-so so-and-so school, or it's, he's in the transfer portal now. And it's harder and harder to keep up with these players. And my worry and my concern is I don't want that to be with high school athletics where we're like worried about, oh my gosh, like this, so many different transfers here and there. And
then the idea too of just the pressure on the kids, like, like Jimmy's a great football quarterback, and it's like, but his, high school maybe doesn't gonna, it's been like a 500 school, but there's this other school that's really good, and everyone's like, oh, you should go to that school, but it's like, they have the friends, they have, how important it is to be in keep that same high school, keep that same type of, kind of mentality, like, that's consistency when you're growing up, and the pressure that they might face to say, I do like it at my current school, but everyone's saying I should go to this other school because if I go there, then I'll have better college opportunities. I can win more games. And it's like there's like this pressure on them to change. I mean, when you're that age, high school, that's like, it's a big thing. It's like your life. It's like that's the people you interact with on a day-to-day basis. That's the thing I just really worry about is I don't want this to lead to more pressure on kids. I think it's going to help a lot of kids in terms of the ones that have to move because of family reasons, whether it's just anything, and they have to move to a new school district. That's going to help them and not have to think, oh man, am I going to miss my junior basketball season just because my dad got a new job, my mom got a new job, and now I live in X school district instead of Y school district.
Right.
I don't want that to happen. It's going to solve that, which is really nice.
Right.
But you don't want the pressure to be, well, I gotta change schools if I really want to get this college scholarship.
No, I agree. And then I think we talked about this too and touched on this on like the grass may not be greener on the other side. We sometimes just not even talking about sports, just life in general. Sometimes we're like, oh, I want that because it looks so shiny. It looks so amazing. Like I know I would do amazing there. And then you get there and you're like, well, this wasn't what I thought it was, and it's like in some instances, maybe it is. And maybe it is the right decision. But that's another worry I have for these athletes is I don't want them to get caught up in all the shiny things and all the materialistic things. And it's like, at the end of the day, and Keith Kinder said it the best too as well. I keep bringing him up, but he had really good sound bites. Yeah. But he said it the best. He was like, at the end of the day, you're just here at high school. You're a kid wanting to participate here, and we're getting out of the reality of having fun with your friends on a Friday night lights, right? And it's like we're getting out of that, and just like you said, more pressure. And so it's kind of hard to kind of think about these children having to have so many things on their mind and what's going to look the best for them. And then they get there and they're not happy. And then it's like, well, then what do you do then? So. And
then as an athlete too, the most important thing you should be thinking about that age is just getting better. Yeah. It's just like, if you're a basketball player, it should be improving your jump shot. If you're an offensive tackle, it should be improving your blocking. If you're a softball player, hitting the ball better. Like, at that age, it's like the most important thing for you is just improving your skills. Because if you are really good and want to have a future going into college or anything like that with it, that's the number one thing. You just got to play better.
Yeah. Right.
Get better at your sport. It's just so interesting. And like, you say the grass isn't always greener, because think about like in college, there are instances where, athletes transfer to one school because they're hearing like, oh, I could be the starting wide receiver at this school, and then it doesn't pan out. Well, they can always just take a redshirt year and they have another year of eligibility. That doesn't work like that in high school. Yeah. If you are a sophomore and then you transfer to a school for your junior season, under these pretenses that that you're gonna get playing time, and then all of a sudden you don't like it there, you're stuck.
Yeah.
Because as a junior now, so you basically like lost your junior season because you didn't like it, you didn't get playing time, maybe they didn't fulfill the promises that they told you, and then all of a sudden this only applies to first-time transfers. Yep. So that next season you have to sit out your senior year, so that's it. That's your high school career. You don't get extra years of it. It's like, and then so even if you left as a freshman and went to another school in your sophomore year, didn't like it, then you transferred again, you'd have to sit out the whole year. This only applies to first-time transfers. All of a sudden you're losing 2 years instead of just one. It can become a thing of like the thing is, if everybody just acts right, if everybody just acts, the way people should,
right,
this rule's fine.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's just these areas where, people could paint a different picture.
Yeah,
say, oh yeah, there's definitely playing time for you here. And then it's just someone that wants to have a better team, and you don't want that to happen to a kid.
Yeah. And then one more thing I'm going to say about the coaches, because I think that kind of ties with what you're saying. But with a lot of these coaches too, they were saying like, as a head coach, you're developing all these players and you've been with these players for, let's just say like 2 or 3 years. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, someone new's coming in. It's like, okay, well, that's great. And we're going to welcome everyone. But now we're going to have to develop you as well in this circle we've already kind of put together. And then it's like, oh, wait, 2 are leaving. And then now, like, we got to work with what we have. And it's like, well, we already had our, like, we've already developed what we had. And we built these relationships with these kids. And it's going to be harder to continue to build these relationships with kids again and again and again. And it's, again, I could see the frustration on the coaches' side of things because, you already got your group. You already got your group for the next year. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's gone. And you're like, well, like this, we're going to have to start from step one. And
the idea too, I'm kind of going with that as well. Like, one thing that there was one example from the West Virginia at the high school Hurricane where a coach went from one school to another. And it was the one example of a lot of kids transferring because it was like the really good football coach going from one powerhouse to this other school he wanted to kind of build up. And like 15, 20 kids followed him. And now, like I said, it is easier in West Virginia because there's no the relocation requirement. But if let's say the coach goes to an open enrollment school and brings 2 or 3 of their best basketball players, the type of effect that now has of like, okay, those couple kids transferring, and then also the kids at the other school who thought, oh, this is my hometown, and then all of a sudden now I don't start my junior and senior year because of this. It really can easily get to that. And one thing before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you too, in your conversations with these coaches, I mean, like you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how are they kind of planning on this? Were some coaches maybe thinking, okay, I'm going to maybe try to recruit or something, or or is it mostly we're not going to touch this and just kind of see how it works? Yeah,
it was honestly all of them really didn't know how to handle it, didn't really know how to go about it, and B were like, let's just say something like this were to happen, then, my number one priority is building my team and continuing the relationships with these kids. And I think Keith Kinder, I again keep bringing him up, but he kept saying, we're going to keep the same Mishawaka culture that we've had throughout all the years. Like, we're not changing a single thing. If a kid wants to come in, we'll welcome them. But at the same time, he wants to develop players that want to be at Mishawaka and want to stay there. So it's not like, I don't know if he knows how to handle it quite yet, but a lot of the coaches were like, we want to keep the same culture that we've had. And then that's not to say like they're not going to welcome these kids that want to come in or kids that want to leave as well. But I think most of them were just kind of like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. This is what's happening. We're going to have to really figure it out. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the way I kind of would have assumed. And if I just had to guess, if I just had to give a prediction right now, we've talked about this. I don't know. I think this first year of it, what we might see is 1 or 2 high-profile times of, oh, wait a second, they're there now? Okay. I don't think we're really going to start seeing the ramifications of this, the actual, like, all the different ways this can affect sports. I agree. For another 2 to 3 years. I think this is going to kind of be a slow build, just to kind of see what exactly happens. This isn't going to be I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're going to start, high school football preview season and we're going to be like, every story is like different webs. Just, he's there now. They're there now. Like maybe that's going to be it. I don't think so. Yeah. I personally think we're going to see a couple examples, but the reason we're doing this right now is because we think this will become a big story. And I think in 2 years, it'll be really interesting to revisit this and see how this has changed over the past 2 years, because in West Virginia, I'm just going to say it, they are already trying to scale back and change this rule in West Virginia. Yeah. Just 2 years, less than 2 years in. And then I'm glad you said that as well, because I feel like that's a good example for us, knowing how long West Virginia has had this rule, because again, just like you said, we don't think it's going to be a big thing within this next year or so, but seeing West Virginia and how it's grown, maybe that'll be like this here in Indiana. And also I want to point out the commissioner said that as well. Like if there's going to be big numbers here and there and they have to change things and they have to like maybe pull back, then he will. So I think that's the number one thing is he doesn't know, even the commissioner doesn't know exactly what this is going to look like. This is set in place now. But again, they will make things, different. Let's just say if things get out of control, really. Yeah, they can, and West Virginia, they didn't change this rule. They actually tweaked their class size rules and their classifications. That's how they kind of responded to it, and that's what we did that recently, and they're going to kind of try it for the next school year. Okay. So there is other ways than just repealing this or changing it back. Yeah. Like you can tweak other things as well to see what the effects are. But I think it'll be really interesting to just
see what happens, because
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows. I think that's the thesis of this whole reporting is we don't know, coaches don't know, the agents don't know, other states don't know, like no one knows. It's just like we'll just have to see.
And it's been fun doing this project with you as well, because I think Jackson and I have literally been learning as we go. Like we're like, wait, that's a thing? Like
Yeah,
like we've just been learning here. So
and I think it'll be really the kind of experience we've had over the past month or so. I think I think a lot of people in this South Bend area are going to be learning a lot of those similar things and Googling IHSAA rule book real quick, like, wait a second, yeah, that's I can do that, or it is fine. I think there's going to be a lot of that. So we hope that everything on our website right now, if you kind of have any questions or wondering about this, go to our website, WNDU.com. We're going to have just, we have all the stories we've done on this. If you want to hear from local coaches, West Virginia, an agent, just kind of all that stuff, that's just kind of can serve as a resource for people that are just trying to learn more about this and maybe think, how will this affect me? How will this affect my community?
Yep, perfect.
Anything else, Sabrina?
I got nothing else to add. My thing will air today.
Sounds good.
I guess this will air later when this.
Whenever you guys are watching this, is honestly we kind of did all this hoping that maybe this will like live on for another year or two, So hopefully someone's looking back at this in a year and a half, like, oh yeah, they were really right.
the information.
Or hopefully they were like, oh, it's really wrong. It actually did. You know what I'm actually hoping? I'm really hoping people can look back at this and say, you know what? It actually didn't really change the community aspect of sports in Indiana. I don't know what they were talking about.
The sports reporters at WNDU do not know what they're talking about.
That is the best case scenario in my mind right now. So if that happens, if you're watching this a year and a half from now and that's the case, then I'm a happy man.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay tuned to WNDU.com and WNDU on TV. We'll have plenty of great stuff coming your way.